All right, that craziness out of the way. So for those who don't know, I grew up in Pensacola, Florida. That is Escambia County, specifically. The reason I say that is, while I've been gone, apparently the entire place went to hell, or rather, it was always hell, and I just didn't know it. This one is from Lady Howl. Said the curse of the Neckoins returns. That is, thanks, I hate it. The next one we have is from Shizryu. Been doodling and decided to make a sort of hollow slime Suris after inking it and realized how much more detail I could have added in to make it less generic and more Suris-y. Looks almost like a coin again. I know it's a hollow from Bleach, but because it's slime Suris, it almost looks like a coin again. Rabbit Ears Blog, thank you for redeeming your points for an owl. The next one we have is, and the last one we have here is from Mathematical Cabbage. Slime Cat, the slimiest cat. Full of slime, much slime. Slime that oozes, much ooze. Much cat? Tasty? Question mark? I don't know if I'd say tasty. It is interesting, though. It really is. And you know what? Screw this hood. We don't need the hood today. All we need is the little bit of levity that the fan art section allows us. Thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future episode, the best way to do so is to drop into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and get ready to talk about this stuff. So, what are we talking about today? We are talking about one of the candidates for the school board in Pensacola, Florida, Elizabeth Jenny Lancaster. Let's go into the things.
Hello. My name is Elizabeth Jenny Lancaster.
Janae, sorry, I got it wrong.
And I am running for Santa Rosa County School Board District 3.
So it's very hard to hear, so I'll repeat the things that she's saying as she says them. She says he's running for the school board.
I am a mother, a grandmother of 3, and very excited to have the 4th grandchild on the way.
So she's a mother, a grandmother of 3. She's very excited for more people coming along the way.
I retired after 28 years as a Federal Reserve law enforcement officer, protection services. I was an operations supervisor at the time I retired.
So basically she's just retired law enforcement.
Our division provided dignitaries.
Does auto caption work? No, the video is from Twitter, so there is no auto caption.
Escorts and protection. We conducted treasury operations and research and investigations.
So just talking about the types of operations that she took care of when she was working there.
I have an associate's degree in criminal justice and received my law enforcement certification through the state of Colorado. I am a conservative and hold Christian values and beliefs.
Okay, so she's conservative. She holds Christian values. That tracks for Pensacola.
I would love to see the prayer reinstated instead of the moment of silence.
She wants to see prayer reinstated instead of the moment of silence. I disagree with that. The moment of silence allows everyone to do whatever it is they want to do, whether it be pray, whether it be pick their nose. Who knows? Who cares? When you have prayer mandated, children who are not religious or children who are of religions that do not have prayer in general are automatically excluded. The only people that think that group mandated prayer is okay tend to be Christian. There's nothing wrong with being Christian, but please understand, like, if you are Christian, you are in the majority in the United States. But everybody in the United States is not a Christian. And I understand that there's the idea that you need to evangelize, you need to get more people to be Christian. I get that. But you need to also understand you operate in a world where not everybody is. That should be okay, as opposed to trying to operate in a world where you are forcing Christian normativity onto everybody. Not everybody is, not everybody wants to be. That is okay. Disagreements like that are part of being an adult.
Our country was founded on Judeo-Christian values and beliefs that I believe should be respected and encouraged.
She believes the country was founded on Judeo-Christian values and believes that those should be respected and encouraged. This is the PragerU talk coming out.
The welfare and protection of the students is my first and foremost priority.
Protection of civilians is her first and foremost priority, okay?
That is one of the main reasons I decided to run. I am in favor of the Guardian program and against any social engineering projects, especially CRT or any ideologies that do not belong in the school platform.
So she is against ideologies that don't belong in the school platform, and she's against any form of social engineering. Ma'am, do you know what mandated school prayer is? Would you like to know the word we have for that? Because we do have one. We have a word for mandated prayer in an area that a student cannot leave. That's social engineering. It is engineering people socially to mandate religiosity onto them, or even a specific religious value. This "it's good for thee and not for me" type of bullshit is kind of normal with a lot of Christian conservatives in the United States, and I don't like that, especially when they may be in charge of my future children. But honestly, there's a lot to parse through with that. Merely the idea in general that you can be against social engineering but be okay with compelled religiosity, which is a form of social engineering. You don't like social engineering when it's things you disagree with, but you're perfectly fine with social engineering when it's things you dislike, or when it's things that you do like. It may be better to say that you are for certain types of social engineering that produce positive values in your mind. But to say you're against social engineering in this light is just a flat-out lie. She also said gender ideology, did she? Hold on.
And against any social engineering projects, especially CRT or any ideologies that do not belong.
Yep, CRT. There's the CRT there. So, CRT. What is CRT? What is critical race theory? Well, generally speaking, it is the idea that you can identify, you can pinpoint a moment in time where racism had an effect on our economy or on a geographic amount of people. As an example, and it's purely a legal theory, it's not a thing that gets taught in schools. We've already gone over the history of Christopher Rufo and how he campaigned to make CRT a dirty word. And he flat out acknowledged that it was entirely a psyop that he was lying about. He lied about everything from the top down because he had a goal in mind, and that was demonizing critical race theory and lumping all kinds of things that weren't CRT into CRT. So let's talk about what CRT is very briefly. What does CRT do? Well, let's say I asked you, hey, why is this group of people over here predominantly black? What is the reason for that? And you said, well, turns out, in the 1930s, we used to have district redlining. And district redlining was technically not a legal thing to do, but it was done anyway, and it was largely done on racial lines to begin with. And then people who were already segregated in racial lines, when they would come forward to try to get loans for houses, they would be denied because they were in an at-risk district, and you didn't want the bank to be at risk on any of their money. But they were arbitrarily at risk. They were only at risk because they were behind a predetermined geographical line that was drawn by those banks themselves. This led to families generationally being stuck in the same geographical locations, and so we started to see the same, we started to see segregation, which wasn't actually mandated anymore, but it just became more organic because it was harder to get out of any of those areas. Now, it's a little easier to avoid stuff like that now because you can move into renting areas. You don't have to necessarily buy a house. That market is larger now, but that damage was done, a century ago. That damage was already done there, and we are still feeling the results of that today. That's what CRT does. CRT is not calling the bank racist. It's not calling even the bank teller racist. It's not calling anyone racist. It's just saying there was a point where systemically racism happened during a point in time. That is all its job is. That's what it does as a legal theory. It lets you identify where that snag is so that you were able to take that information and do with it what you would. And legally speaking, there's a lot of things you could do with that information. What you do with it, not my concern. But the identifiability of that information, that's what CRT does. We still have systemic racism, yes, but it takes different forms. So, when somebody says they're anti-CRT, typically what they mean is not they're against that legal theory and practice, because that's fine. That doesn't get taught in K through 12 schools. What they're against is things like sensitivity training. What they're against is things like talking about the Trail of Tears. What they're against is things like talking about black people and the things that we did to them historically in the United States. We have a lot of erasure here. In fact, actually, anybody here who's in the South with me, can you go ahead and tell me the name that you hear predominantly here when you talk about the Civil War? Because it's not called the Civil War most of the time down here. This isn't necessarily a thing that the education system has to be blamed for, but it has a hand in it. Typically, the word we have for it here is the War of Northern Aggression, as opposed to, you know, a war about fucking slavery. Usually, the apologetics for that end up being something like, it was a war about states' rights! But then when you start asking, okay, cool, I get that, states' rights, cool. I can agree with that. States' rights to do what? What were the states trying to do specifically? What rights were they trying to maintain? The exact same thing is happening now when we talk about the Supreme Court. They removed abortion protections in the United States. The apologetic is they just sent it back to states. Okay, yeah, but states' rights to what? Mandate control over women's bodies. Doesn't matter that it's at the state level. That doesn't make it somehow more freedomy or more libertarian. Dylan says, I grew up hearing people say that all the time. Yeah, that's what I grew up with as well. Most people who grow up in the South grow up with some form of Southern apologetics for the Civil War. So when people say that they are anti-CRT, they're usually saying they're pro those kinds of apologetics. At least, that's what the research we found from Christopher Rufo led me to believe. And what I've seen largely whenever people like Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, Matt Walsh, any of the big names talk about it.
In the school platform, the children should not be burdened with the woke agenda that is leading a path of destruction everywhere it goes.
The children should not be burdened with the woke agenda that is leading a path of destruction everywhere it goes. So I have to ask, how does this destruction manifest? Usually, somebody's answer to that is going to be something like, it's destroying the nuclear family. It's destroying the fabric of society, the sanctity of marriage. Typically, they can't even define what they mean when they say woke. Now, as far as I'm concerned, woke is just a fast, easy way to say leftism. Once upon a time, it was a word used more in indigenous and communities of color because it was saying you were woke to systemic racism. That's what it originated as. It's been turned into, a slur's not the word for it, but certainly a dirty word for people on the left. We're called people who are woke, though the actual definition of what woke is, they can't really define very well because it was an appropriated term from another group of people who used it more correctly when they've made it. Yay, buzzwords!
Just to mention what has recently surfaced, the pharmaceutical companies are paying $1.3 million for each gender reassignment. I don't know about you, but I am wondering how they are getting in contact with these children.
So, she says the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies. So we're already very fucking vague. We don't have a name for the pharmaceutical companies or anything. We just have the vague platitude. the pharmaceutical companies are paying $1.3 million to assign each person's gender. And then she asks, I wonder how they're coming in contact with those children. Ignoring the fact that, by and large, we don't do gender reassignment anything to children. We don't. This is why puberty blockers exist. Puberty blockers are not gender reassignment. They are a thing to enable late-stage puberty happening in kids who start experiencing things like dysphoria. When they start experiencing those negative traits, things like puberty blockers buy them time to figure out whether or not they're trans. You may not like that there is a medication that drastically increases the survival rate of trans kids and allows them to have a much easier time transitioning as an adult. But science doesn't give two flying fucks about your opinion. Facts don't care about your feelings. And I hate to say it, at the end of the day, that is still not transitioning children. I don't know where she gets the information of 1.3 million per gender reassignment from giant company not named. I don't know where that information is coming from. My guess is she heard it on one of her favorite podcasting platforms, because she's using all the buzzwords.
These doctors that are going along and mutilating these children and prescribing hormone blockers to these kids.
Mutilating these children and ascribing hormone blockers to these kids. So, let's talk about the science of hormone blockers. What does a hormone blocker do? Well, it allows your body to produce as much estrogen, androgen, testosterone as it would normally, but it blocks that from being absorbed into your body the way it normally would. Your body is still producing it, it's trying its best to, but it's making it to where you are not sensitive to those chemicals that are being produced in your body, those natural chemicals there. Now, what are the reasons that we give puberty blockers to kids? Well, one of them is kids who have early onset breast cancer. When you use puberty blockers actually starve breast cancer of its food. Those hormones that your body is producing, that's what breast cancer is trying to eat. Everything that is built up from your body with those hormones, that's what it's feeding off of. That's what it's growing from. Puberty blockers literally save people's lives when it comes to stuff like that. In fact, actually, during the study that Blair White tried to cite about people's brain swelling with puberty blockers, which was 6 kids total, and 6 kids over the course of several thousand children, so it didn't even reach the levels of medically accepted statistic... what is it? Statistic reliability? No. I can't remember the actual word for it. Statistic significance. That's the one. Statistical significance. Despite the fact that those side effects didn't even reach what would be required for statistical significance, they still got used. But there was something really interesting we figured out during that. Of the 6 instances of people who were on puberty blockers who got those negative effects, only one of them was receiving puberty blockers as a part of gender-affirming care. Almost as if, by and large, puberty blockers have been and always will be used for more than just trans care. There's a variety of health reasons we use them, but they get demonized for trans kids. Remember, if you need any kind of affirming care, if you need any kind of therapy, if you need that, if you're cis, you tend to have more access to it. But when you're trans, that tends to get stripped away from you. Why? Because people are stupid. That's the biggest reason why. I wish I could give you a more solid reason why trans people have it harder in the United States, but the real reason is stupidity and bigotry. That's what it boils down to. But yeah, we use puberty blockers in cases of early onset puberty, we use puberty blockers in case of illnesses that are exacerbated by puberty, and we use puberty blockers in cases of early onset dysphoria. When we have dysphoria happening at early ages, puberty blockers buy the time for children to figure out whether or not that dysphoria is something that will pass away or something that will actually stick with them that needs to be helped with hormone therapy later on down the road. There's nothing wrong with puberty blockers. And anybody who wants to claim that, oh my God, look at all these side effects, you're right. There are side effects to puberty blockers. Side effects like calcium deficiency. You know how you fix a calcium deficiency? You consume more calcium. Wow, I have a vitamin D deficiency. You know how I solve that? I consume more vitamin D. That's typically how that works. So, that, I'm so tired of hearing conservatives go up on pulpits and say dumb shit about puberty blockers without reading any medical papers on it, without reading anything about how gender is even formed in the mind, without understanding any of the science behind that. They get up on podiums and they say the shit that they heard their favorite podcasters say, and they parrot it like they're a parakeet. But let's go ahead and continue.
In my opinion, they should be hanging from the nearest tree.
I need that whole sentence.
Doctors that are going along with mutilating these children and prescribing hormone blockers to these kids, in my opinion, they should be hanging from the nearest tree.
All right, couple of things here. One, mutilating these kids. Can I be honest with you guys about something? I was mutilated as a child. Twice, in fact. They were horrible experiences, and they've stuck with me my entire life. I was mutilated. One of those mutilations was considered very normal. It was a circumcision. That is genital mutilation. Definitionally, that is exactly what that is. Guess what? That's a thing that happens to kids all the time. I was mutilated again in 6th grade. I had a piece of me cut out, and my body has never fully recovered from it. It can't grow the piece that was cut out of it. I was mutilated because I had appendicitis, and I needed my appendix cut out. So, what I want to say is that, by and large, 99.99999% of the time, we do not do transition surgeries on minors. We don't. That's just not a thing that generally happens, at least not to a statistically significant degree. But you know what we do? Surgery. In general, to minors. All the time. When you say mutilating people, what you mean to say is surgery. And I say that because these are the apologetics that were used against surgery for centuries. If you look at older medical documentation, there were a ton of illnesses that could be fixed with surgery, but there was such a social stigma against surgery for things like appendicitis that people ended up just dying because they would rather do that than go with getting their body cut open because it was seen as mutilation. It was seen as horrific. This is just repackaging that exact same information, that exact same misinformation, and utilizing it again. So when somebody says mutilating your body, remind them, yeah, it's just called surgery. We do it all the time. It's pretty fucking normal. But now I need to get to the second part of this. The part that concerns me more. When she says that anybody that prescribes puberty blockers to kids needs to be hung from a tree. Why is it that doctors prescribing known safe medicine to children, why is it that somebody can go to the Escambia County School District, call for their deaths on a public platform, and watch what happens?
Follow the money.
How is it that we have come to this point in our society where treating children with medication that is known to reduce suicidality as the rates of suicidality increase by and large in our country, especially for trans people? Why is it that prescribing safe medication to kids that is used for a variety of reasons over and above being trans, why is that a call for killing someone, and why is that something to be celebrated? That doesn't make any goddamn sense to me. And yet this is happening in the town I grew up in. This is a person trying to become part of the school board for the education system that raised me. So this hits very close to home, because Florida, for 18 years, was my home. And while it's never been great, from the sidelines here, I get to watch it get much, much worse. Also, as for where Lancaster got that misinformation, the $1.3 million for every trans kid, gee, I wonder, was my guess about it being from one of her favorite podcasters accurate? Because this is straight from Matt Walsh's movie. Quoted again by the Daily Wire. It's very easy to figure out where the source of all of this shit is. All of it. It said, oh dear, not the shit-umentary. Yep. Matt Walsh's What is a Woman movie. The deceptively edited piece of shit film that it is. Now, there was a version of the video made with captions, and I should have used that one, but I just found it. Because this was a link sent to me that I hadn't watched previously. But it's there. So I'm just getting back from my nightly shower, and what the fuck did I come back to? You came back to sadness, unfortunately. I don't like watching places that I grew up in fall into this kind of nuttery. I don't. It hurts. I'm guessing the police did nothing. Some of the police were probably the ones in that audience clapping their hands. In the United States, that is not considered incitement to violence, despite the fact that it very much is incitement to violence. But it needs to be directly targeted for the police to care. And they don't. Yeah, she was retired police. What are the police going to do? Look at her and go, no. That's what they're going to do. If you want a link to that, here, I can give you the link. There you are. There's the link to it. So, that's that. And that's what's going on where I used to live. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'm tired. I'm tired. If you enjoyed this content, hit the like button if you want to. Subscribe if you haven't already. And, as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.